1, A Tale of the Amazon Jungle. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where the trees towered like ancient guardians and the humidity pressed against the skin like an invisible weight, a man named Thomas Blake embarked on the adventure of a lifetime. A passionate explorer, Thomas had spent years reading about the mystical wonders of the Amazon, its wildlife, its history, its untold secrets. But most of all, he was drawn to the one thing that eluded even the most seasoned adventurers: the lost tribes, the ones that had lived for centuries, hidden from the modern world. They were said to be mysterious, fierce, and shrouded in legends. Thomas had always felt that his destiny lay within that jungle. At the age of 32, he was not just another tourist looking to tick off an item from his bucket list. He was a man on a mission, determined to uncover the truths the world had long forgotten. Equipped with the best survival gear, a team of guides from the local villages, and an unshakable resolve, he entered the Amazon with a deep sense of excitement. The first few days went as expected: dense, humid forests with the sounds of unseen creatures calling from the depths. The air was thick, and the green of the jungle was endless. It was an awe-inspiring beauty that made everything feel both thrilling and suffocating. But as they ventured deeper, the signs of civilization began to fade, replaced by strange markings on trees and mysterious symbols etched into the ground. As night fell on the 5th day of the expedition, Thomas and his team set up camp by a river, where the sounds of the jungle came alive in the darkness. But as they sat around the fire, something in the air shifted. The very trees seemed to whisper in the wind, their leaves rustling in an unnatural rhythm. It was then that one of the guides, an older man named Felipe, began to speak. "Do not stray far from the camp," he warned in a hushed voice, his eyes darting around the firelight. "There are things in these woods, things that you cannot understand. They watch always." Thomas chuckled, dismissing the older man's fears as nothing more than superstitions. But Felipe's eyes were wide, filled with a kind of terror that made Thomas uncomfortable. "The spirits of the forest," Felipe murmured. "They are old, very old. They do not like outsiders." The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but the seeds of doubt had been planted in Thomas's mind. Still, he shrugged it off. He was an explorer, not a believer in superstitions. On the 7th day, they stumbled upon something that made their hearts skip a beat: an ancient stone temple, half swallowed by the earth and overrun with vines. It was not on any map. There were no records of its existence. The walls were covered in carvings, some depicting humans, others showing creatures unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. The sight of the temple took his breath away. It was what he had been searching for, a relic from the past, untouched by time. Despite the growing sense of unease in his chest, Thomas insisted they explore further. The guides were reluctant, especially Felipe, who begged Thomas to leave. But the explorer's curiosity won out. He pressed forward, determined to uncover its secrets. As they ventured deeper into the temple, the air grew colder, and the shadows in the corridors seemed to shift and stretch unnaturally. A feeling of dread settled over the group. Something was wrong, but no one could pinpoint what. It was then that they found the chamber. Inside, a large stone altar stood in the center, covered in dust and moss. On the walls, more carvings depicted strange rituals, sacrifices, and what appeared to be offerings to some kind of god. At the far end of the room was a pedestal, and on it, an object that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy: a dark stone, smooth and obsidian-like, glowing faintly. Thomas's heart raced. This was it. This was the discovery that would make him famous, the find of a lifetime. He moved towards the pedestal without a second thought, ignoring the unease that was creeping up his spine. "Thomas, wait!" Felipe shouted, his voice filled with terror. "Do not touch it. It is cursed." But it was too late. As Thomas's fingers brushed against the dark stone, The ground beneath them rumbled, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the temple. The walls seemed to close in on them, the shadows growing darker, more alive. And then the voices started. They were not human voices. They were something else. Whispers in a language that Thomas couldn't understand, but that crawled beneath his skin like nails dragging against bone. His vision blurred, and the air grew thick with a sense of malevolent presence. The stone in his hand grew warmer, almost hot, and the whispers grew louder. "Thomas!" Felipe screamed, his voice breaking with panic. "Release it!" But it was too late. With a deafening crack, the altar split open, revealing a dark, gaping hole in the earth. Something from within that hole rose, a massive, shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It was a creature of nightmares, its form shifting and contorting as if made of smoke and darkness, its mouth opening in a silent scream. In a flash, the creature lunged towards Thomas, its tendrils reaching out like arms of the abyss. The last thing he heard was a bone-chilling roar and Felipe's screams as the world around him went black. The search for Thomas Blake was extensive. His team, now in panic, scrambled to find any trace of him. The jungle was relentless, its thick undergrowth swallowing up any sign of human life. They scoured the area around the temple for days, but there was no sign of him. No body, no blood, no trace at all. It was as though Thomas had vanished into the very air itself. The local authorities were eventually called in, but even they could find no explanation. Felipe, the last to see him, was found wandering the jungle days later, babbling incoherently. His eyes were wide, his face pale, and his body covered in cuts and bruises. When he spoke, it was in a trembling voice. "The jungle, it took him. It's alive. It's watching us." Days turned into weeks, and still no trace of Thomas. The expedition was officially called off. The mystery of his disappearance became just another tale of the jungle, a story of a man who sought too much, who pushed too far into the heart of darkness and paid the price for it. 2 years passed. In a small town near the Amazon, a group of tourists gathered in a local bar, drinking and chatting about their travels. One man, an older traveler named Jack, leaned in and began to tell a story, his voice hushed, as if afraid someone might overhear. "I was there, you know," Jack said, his eyes darting around nervously. "I've heard the rumors, the stories about the disappearance of Thomas Blake. But what they don't tell you is that I was part of the rescue team that went in after him." The others leaned in, eager for more. "We never found his body," Jack continued. "But we found something else. A journal. It was Thomas's. The pages were strange. There were drawings of the temple, of that stone he touched. But there were other things too, things that shouldn't be on paper." Jack paused for a moment, letting the silence hang in the air. "I've never been able to get rid of the feeling that we were being watched. It was like the jungle itself knew we were there, that we were intruders. But the worst part—" He looked around the room, lowering his voice to a whisper. "The worst part is that the last entry in his journal was written in a language no one could read. But the drawings were clear. It was him, standing in front of the altar. And above him, carved into the stone, was something or someone that had the same eyes as Thomas. His face, but twisted, dark, and watching us." The room fell silent. No one spoke for a long while. And in that silence, something else became clear. The jungle had taken Thomas Blake, but it had not let him go. The Amazon had claimed him, body and soul. And somewhere, deep in the heart of that forest, Thomas Blake still roamed, no longer human, but a shadow among shadows, forever bound to the ancient darkness that lay beneath the jungle's surface. The jungle had its secrets. And now, so did Thomas. Story 2. A team of researchers and thrill seekers, led by Dr. Alan Pierce, ventured deep into the Amazon. The team consisted of Dr. Alan Pierce, a seasoned archaeologist obsessed with uncovering hidden civilizations; Emily Carter, a wildlife photographer eager to capture rare creatures; Jake Reynolds, a former soldier acting as the group's protector; Daniel Hayes, a documentary filmmaker hoping to create a viral expedition series; Lena Thompson, a botanist fascinated by the medicinal plants of the jungle; Carlos Rivera, their local guide, familiar with the dangers of the Amazon; Miguel Santos, Carlos' assistant, young but knowledgeable about jungle survival. The group's goal was to locate a legendary lost temple known as La Casa de los Espíritus, the House of Spirits. According to indigenous legends, the temple was cursed, home to restless spirits that devoured anyone who dared enter. Carlos warned them against this mission. "Some places are meant to be left alone," he said grimly. But ambition and curiosity blinded the group to his words. The first sign of horror. After 3 days of trekking through dense rainforest, strange occurrences began. At night, the group heard whispers in the wind, soft, sorrowful voices speaking in an unknown language. Shadows moved between the trees, but when they turned their flashlights, there was nothing there. On the 4th day, Emily vanished. One moment she was behind the group taking photographs, and the next she was gone. No scream. No struggle. Just gone. Panic set in. They searched for hours, calling her name, but the jungle remained silent. Then, Miguel found her camera lying on the ground. The last picture taken sent chills down their spines. It was of Emily, but standing behind her was a tall, faceless figure cloaked in black mist. The Temple of Spirits. With no sign of Emily, the team pressed on, hoping to reach the temple and find answers. They arrived at an ancient stone structure, half buried under vines. The walls were carved with images of tortured souls, their mouths open in silent screams. Inside, the air was thick with decay. The deeper they went, the colder it became, an unnatural chill in the sweltering jungle. Then they saw them. Ghosts. Pale, transparent figures hovered in the shadows. Their faces were twisted in agony, their hollow eyes locked onto the intruders. Some had missing limbs, others had gaping wounds, but all carried an overwhelming sense of sorrow and rage. Then the spirits moved. The haunting begins. A deafening screech echoed through the temple as the spirits lunged. Jake, the ex-soldier, fired his rifle, but the bullets passed through the apparitions. The spirits grabbed him, and before the others could react, he vanished, pulled into the darkness. Daniel, recording the entire ordeal, screamed as one of the ghosts hovered inches from his face, whispering in a long-dead tongue. His body convulsed, eyes rolling back, and he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Carlos grabbed Lena's arm. "We have to leave. Now!" But the spirits weren't done. As they ran, Lena felt something pulling her backward. She turned and saw Emily. But something was wrong. Her eyes were pure black, her mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. "You left me," she whispered. Lena screamed as Emily's cold, decayed hands wrapped around her throat. In an instant, she was gone, dragged into the abyss. Escape from hell. Dr. Pierce, Carlos, and Miguel were the last survivors. They sprinted through the temple, the wails of the dead chasing them. Just as they reached the entrance, Miguel tripped. Carlos turned back to help him, only to see shadowy hands emerge from the ground, pulling Miguel down. His screams faded as the earth swallowed him. Carlos and Dr. Pierce barely made it out. The moment they stepped outside, the jungle fell eerily silent. The spirits did not follow. They ran without looking back, stumbling through the forest until they collapsed near their campsite. The aftermath. By morning, a search team found them, shaken, pale, and barely able to speak. When asked about the others, Carlos simply muttered, "The jungle took them." Dr. Pierce never spoke of the expedition again. He disappeared months later. Some say he went mad. Others believe he went back to the temple, called by the voices of the dead. As for Carlos, he left the jungle forever. But sometimes, in the dead of night, he swears he can still hear whispers in the wind, calling his name. Years later, Daniel's lost footage was found in a recovered camera. The last frame showed something horrifying: Emily, staring directly into the lens, her black eyes filled with rage. And then, a whisper. "You're next." Story 3. The Curse of the Phantom Anaconda, the Amazon's Ghost Forest. The Amazon rainforest has always been a land of mysteries, where nature thrives in its rawest form, and the unknown lurks in the shadows. Explorers, researchers, and treasure hunters have ventured into its depths, only for many to never return. But among the indigenous tribes, there is one legend that stands above all. Beware the phantom anaconda. It is not just a beast, but a spirit that feeds on the souls of those who enter its cursed domain. For years, these warnings were dismissed as mere superstition, until one man came back with a story so horrifying that no one dared to enter the forest again. This is his story. Ethan Cole, a 34-year-old travel vlogger, had explored the world's most dangerous places. His motto was simple: "Fear is just another adventure." When he heard rumors of a giant anaconda in an uncharted region of the Amazon, he knew he had to go. "Anacondas are big, but they're not supernatural," he told his team. "It's just a snake. We'll get some footage, and I'll show people the truth." His team consisted of Nathan Ross, a wildlife expert; Samantha Lee, a survivalist and camerawoman; Diego Alvarez, a local guide familiar with the jungle's dangers; Ben Carter, a drone operator. They arrived at the last known village before the untouched jungle began. The villagers were terrified. "Do not go," an old woman warned them. "The forest is cursed. The anaconda is not of this world." Ethan laughed. "Ghost stories won't stop us, ma'am." That night, the villagers performed a ritual, burning herbs and chanting under the moon. Ethan ignored them. He had a story to tell, and he wasn't leaving without it. The team ventured deep into the jungle, cutting through the thick vegetation. The air was humid, the sound of wildlife surrounding them. But then, the jungle fell silent. No birds, no insects, just an eerie stillness. "Something's wrong," Diego muttered. Then they saw it. A massive anaconda, larger than anything ever recorded, coiled around an ancient tree. Its black scales shimmered like oil, and its yellow eyes glowed unnaturally. Nathan gasped. "That thing is at least 60 feet long." Samantha raised her camera, whispering, "We are witnessing history." But then the snake turned its head toward them. Its eyes locked onto Ethan. And then it smiled. No snake should be able to smile. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Did you see that?" Ben was already flying his drone for a closer look. "Guys, something's off with this thing." The snake moved, too fast for its size, slithering toward them. Then it disappeared. Not into the jungle. It just vanished into thin air. The team stood frozen. "What the hell just happened?" Samantha whispered. No one had an answer. That night, they set up camp, shaken but determined to continue. Nathan, still excited, analyzed the footage. "This could be the biggest discovery of the century." Diego, however, was uneasy. "We should leave. That was not a normal snake." At midnight, Ethan woke up gasping for air. A heavy pressure crushed his chest. Through the dim light of the fire, he saw something slithering toward him. The anaconda. But this time, it was not a snake. Its massive body shifted, twisting, warping into something humanoid. Its flesh turned gray. Its eyes sunk into hollow voids. The massive anaconda had become a ghostly figure, a monstrous entity with the head of a snake and the body of a decayed human. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of jagged, human-like teeth. And then it spoke. "You should not be here!" Ethan screamed. The entire team woke up, rushing to Ethan. But the moment they saw it, they knew they were going to die. The creature let out an inhuman shriek, its voice layered with whispers of the dead. Samantha grabbed her camera, filming the horror. Ben tried to run, but the moment he stepped beyond the firelight, he vanished. 1 second he was there. The next, gone. "Ethan!" Nathan yelled. "Move!" They sprinted into the jungle, the ghostly anaconda gliding after them, passing through trees like mist. Diego turned, pulling out a tribal talisman. He muttered a prayer and threw it at the creature. The moment it touched the ghost, the jungle screamed. A deafening wail filled the air, and the creature burst into black mist. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the whispers returned. "You cannot escape! This is our land!" The jungle around them shifted. Trees twisted into faces, hollow eyes watching them. The ground beneath them moved, like a breathing corpse. "We're in the ghost's domain," Diego whispered. "This is no normal jungle. It's a graveyard." One by one, they fell. Samantha was dragged into the trees, her screams fading into the whispers. Nathan was pulled underground, his hands clawing at the dirt before vanishing. Diego stayed by Ethan's side, chanting in his native tongue. "Stay close! If we lose each other, we are dead." The trees shifted again. A path opened. A way out. Ethan and Diego ran for their lives. The whispers chased them. The ghostly anaconda reformed, its massive body blocking the path. It lunged. Diego shoved Ethan forward. "Go!" The last thing Ethan saw was Diego being swallowed whole, not by the snake, but by the forest itself. Ethan ran. He ran until the jungle was behind him, until he was back at the village, until he was safe. Or so he thought. Epilogue: the truth no one believed. Ethan told his story to the world. No one believed him. The footage was corrupted, the video filled with static, the audio replaced by whispers. No bodies were found. No proof remained. Only Ethan. But he was never the same. At night, he heard the whispers. Sometimes, when he looked into the mirror, he saw the anaconda's yellow eyes staring back at him. And when he slept, he dreamed of the jungle, because the Amazon had never let him go. The ghost forest had marked him, and one day it would come back for him.